Welcome to the Significance of Wealth podcast, where we explore the evolving landscape of wealth management, private investments, and collecting as both a passion and an investment strategy. I'm Marty Salt. Today's guest recently made international headlines, and not by accident. AJ Scaramucci is the founder and managing partner of Solari Capital, a venture capital firm investing across industries including artificial intelligence, aerospace, biotech, and digital infrastructure. He also serves as co-chairman and president of SALT, one of the world's leading global investment and leadership platforms. Earlier this year, AJ stepped into the Collectibles spotlight when he won a 42-day auction to acquire the ultra-rare Pikachu Illustrator Pokémon card for $16.5 million, setting a record for the most expensive trading card ever sold. The purchase reflects a broader thesis AJ is pursuing through a new venture called Treasure Trove, which aims to identify and acquire rare, culturally significant assets around the world. In this episode, AJ and Tom discuss the thinking behind that purchase and the bigger idea behind Treasure Trove, why scarce collectibles may represent an overlooked asset class, how global capital is beginning to move into this space, and what it means to build wealth through the world's rarest objects. Now here's your host, Tom Ruggie.
Welcome to this month's edition of the Significance of Wealth podcast. I am super excited to have with me today AJ Scaramucci. AJ was the buyer of the most expensive Pokemon card ever purchased, a whopping value or purchase price of $16.5 million. And, with me being pretty involved in the collectibles market, I was contacted to do an interview. And I did an interview and it got published the next day. And AJ followed up with me. And when I got the initial message that the purchaser of the Pokemon card was contacting me, I was like, oh man, this guy's probably pissed at me because, I was trying to fathom how the card could be valued at $16.5 million. And we're going to talk about that today. So with no further ado, AJ, thank you so much for joining us. And I'd love for you to give a little bit of a background about yourself before we get into Pokemon and your other endeavors that you're involved in, which is pretty plentiful.
But Tom, good to see you. Yeah, my quick story is I worked in Silicon Valley for a bit. I had some roles at Tesla and at Google. Then I moved down to Los Angeles and had a spectacular experience working as an entrepreneur in residence with Dr. Peter Diamandis. We collaborated and built a number of different companies together. And then eventually I moved to China. I was investing alongside Dr. Kai-Fu Lee at Sinovation Ventures, who is the CEO of Google China, is a prominent node in the AI ecosystem out there. Got COVID in China in November of 2019, so had to get out of there and enrolled in business school over at Stanford. And while I was there, started a venture capital firm called Solari Capital. And at Solari Capital, we both invest and incubate companies. We have a very multi-stage approach. So we'll invest tickets as small as $2 million up to $150 million into things that we like and we have high conviction.
Walk me through the process and to some extent even the mindset that you had with this card. I mean, there were 97 bidders on the card. It was auctioned through Golden Auctions. I think the period of time that the auction was open was 42 days. Was your mindset going in, hey, I'm going to get this no matter what? Or was it something that kind of incubated over time as you got more involved in the bidding process?
It's a great question. It's a very textured and nuanced question. I would almost sort of zoom out and maybe give you a sense on my philosophy as a collector and maybe some of the origin stories and decisions I've made that ultimately culminated in that purchase. But back in 2020, so about 6 years ago, we're in the midst of the pandemic, people are at home, and I had some more discretionary income at that time from various ventures. And I am on eBay mostly, and I'm on Golden Auctions, and I'm on Heritage. And I was buying a lot of trading cards at the time. both in the sports category, basketball, football, baseball, you name it, but also more so in Pokemon. And Pokemon was right in the crosshairs of my childhood nostalgia. I was 7, 8, 9 years old when those Game Boy games came to the United States, circa 1998, 1999, as well as the trading cards. And I thought that just intuitively, I mean, Pokemon's the highest grossing franchise of all time. These cards are absolutely iconic and they're incredibly scarce, particularly the ones that are graded by, say, a PSA or Beckett or CGC, which is a third-party authentication service that steps in almost like a Moody's rating agency. So I started buying some of the PSA 10 Charizards, the Neo Genesis Lugias, just different things I could get my hands on at the time. And that portfolio, as ridiculous as it sounded, Pokemon cards, is up over 10 times over that 6-year period. And some of these cards now are $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, and they're no longer cards. They feel like pieces of art, and they need to have insurance, and they need to be vaulted. They need to be stored safe. And in 2021 and 2022, I became privy to more layers of the Pokemon collectible universe that were beyond even what I could see. And this Illustrator card popped up, and the story of that card is fascinating. It's a card that you can't buy. You had to earn or win in an Illustrator competition in Japan in 1998. And there's really 39 to 41 of those in circulation and just one in a PSA 10. All right, so you've got this interesting dynamic where this iconic Pikachu card was up for sale in 2022. I hadn't actually heard about it at the time. And Logan Paul came out of the woodwork with a whopping $5.3 million purchase.
Which at that time was an insane valuation for that card too, right? Yeah.
It was an insane number at the time. And I had it actually, him buying that card drove up the value of all the cards that I had bought a few years earlier. Pretty dramatically, actually. Yeah. And I'd say
for him buying it's kind of like a marketing. I mean, it's almost like just a marketing push because I mean he's a marketer and of course, as anybody that's familiar with the story knows, he wore a gold and diamond necklace around his neck everywhere he went. And yeah.
Absolutely right. Yeah. I think Logan, in many ways, he's kind of a pioneer in collecting. I think he, in some ways, I view him as an activist investor in the same way, say, a Bill Ackman might be, or a Dan Loeb might be, where they make an investment and they tell you about it. They tell the story of why this thing is undervalued, and they're phenomenal marketers, and they drive up prices in the collector universe, not just for them, but for everybody else that's participating. And, I'd say, the Pokemon universe now, I mean, now that we're 30 years into it, it's got multiple generations of fans. It's done $288 billion of gross sales over that time. And not only is the highest grossing franchise of all time, it's like living in another dimension, almost like another electron orbital. If you added up the total gross revenue of Harry Potter and Marvel and Star Wars combined, it would be less than Pokemon. And Pokemon, if you look at trading cards, and my best guess, there's some fuzziness here, but order of magnitude, the market cap of trading cards is about 60 billion now. And my best guess, scraping PSA, Beckett CGC data, is the market cap of Pokemon is approaching $15 billion. I mean, that is a massive, gargantuan subset of that superset. So when you look further, it's like, okay, well, Pokemon and Pikachu are synonyms with each other, right? They're tied together. If I asked you, Tom, hey, name one swimmer, who would you name?
I think you probably know Michael Phelps.
There you go. Can you name a second swimmer for me?
What's funny is who crossed my mind is Greg Louganis, but he's actually a diver.
But I'm playing with you here.
Yeah.
For there's power laws everywhere, right? And so Pikachu inside the trading card universe, because Pikachu is such an iconic character, there's so many cards, right? And if you look at the top 10 most graded cards submitted to PSA, over half of them are Pikachu cards in the Pokemon universe. The number one most graded card is actually a collaboration between the Pokemon Company and McDonald's. It's a Pikachu at McDonald's. It's been graded 302,000 times. I mean, I would encourage your audience to look up the Van Gogh Pikachu. It was a collaboration between the Pokemon Company and the Van Gogh Museum. A number of years ago, they had some pop-ups where they were giving these cards out, and it was an incentive for people to come to the museum. There's videos on the internet of absolute pandemonium, stampedes in the museum. Kids, adults, scalpers, in some cases pushing and shoving, trying to get this card. And this card, there's a publicly traded company now in Hong Kong that is aggregating just that one card, the Pikachu Van Gogh card. It's got a $90 million market cap. So when you try and find Pikachu in the trading card universe, and you have to ask, like, where is the nested power law? Well, there's a power law in Pokemon, as there is in swimming and all these other places we've established that. Well, where's the power law in the Pikachu card universe? And it's to this illustrator, because this illustrator is the original artist drawing Pikachu for nearly the very first time on a card. Only 39-41 in circulation. Only one in a PSA 10, which is why you saw this parabolic price action. And anytime there's a one of one in collecting, that's what happens. And my take, which I don't even think is that hot of a take, is that the Pikachu card, the Illustrator card that we now own, I think is more valuable than all of the first edition PSA 10 Charizards combined, which would insinuate over $130 million of value, let alone the media and marketing value that came from purchasing the card. I mean, the fact that you knew about it and so many people knew about it, and the sports card community too, they reach out to me and they're like, what the hell's going on? How is it possible that a Pokemon card broke the record for the most expensive card? And I counter and I say, well, the revenue of the Pokemon Company on an annual basis is bigger than Major League Baseball. It's bigger than the NHL, guys. Right? And I think a lot of that has to do just with the generations that are interested in these things, right? Pokemon fans, they're below the age of 35, ultimately. So, there's a disconnect in understanding.
Also has to do, I think, with the global attributes, because,
True too.
You mentioned the sports card industry, which, I've been very involved in for years and years, but in large, I don't know the stats, but I would have to think that that's probably 90% of the big purchases are U.S. purchases. And obviously, Pokemon is a global phenomenon. AJ, I want to get back to the process and perhaps even the final day or night of bidding.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know kind of what was going through your mind. Did you know anything about who you were bidding against?
Yeah. Yes, I did. I mean, me and my team, we ran a full-blown investigation trying to reverse engineer who else was in the auction. We found a variety of people all over the world. In places like China, to Brazil, to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, to Saudi, to the UK. To your point about global, it was, as I joked with Ken Golden afterwards, it felt like World War Pikachu that night. It was bits up and in all over the world, right? And I knew that there were at least 6 very, very serious, kind of institutional bidders that we're going to take this well above 10. I knew that those 6, there could have been maybe 3 or 4 of those 6 that were going to take it above 13, which was where the record started to break, right? Because last year that dual Logo Man card that Kevin O'Leary and his crew bought sold for about $12.9 million. So I knew that the record was going to be broken coming into the night. And, the poly market and the Cal sheet prediction markets didn't know that, right? The kind of weighted average pricing on those.
Yeah, you probably could have made some money on the poly market that night.
I probably could have. I really didn't want to put myself in that kind of situation, but obviously, I was an observer and I'm like, okay, I don't know if people are fully appreciating and understanding what is about to happen. And, this consensus guess of 10, 11 million, which is kind of where it was floating, was off. It was off by at least $2 to $3 million.
And you
In my
knew
view.
that going in, or at least you felt that
I
way
did.
going in. So you were
I did.
prepared to pay what you paid for this.
I was. Yeah, I was. And I think that I knew the record was going to get broken for sure. Beyond 13 million, it started to become a little bit more of a gray area, or a kind of a blue ocean. It's okay. I know that there's going to be about 6 people that are going to kind of take it into this zone, but I don't really have a nuanced understanding of, is there going to be a significant fall? I figured there'd be a significant fall off after 15 million. And I think, I could be wrong, Ken Golden would know, after 15 million, there were still 3 bidders in the mix. And around like 15 and a half, it was 2. And then up to that 16 and a half, it really was a kind of a 1v1 type scenario. And there was a Chinese bidder, a Hong Kong based consortium that was in the mix to the very end. But yeah, I mean, it's wild. I mean, the reality is that there was a high willingness to pay for that card globally by many bidders, some of which had material institutional backing. But I think people underestimated them.
I've personally participated in probably 100 auctions, and there's times where your anxiety level, because you want something so badly, that your anxiety level gets to a point. And you obviously went into this with a plan and a desire.
Right.
And so it's something you wanted, but your anxiety level had to be skyrocketing.
I was so crazy prepared for that night. I was pretty chill. The last hour or so, I definitely, towards the end, I was like, wow. I was shocked even, or I was beginning to become shocked. Like, wow, this is not just breaking the record. We're going to be breaking the record by a pretty significant margin.
Yeah.
Like 3+ million, right? So, and I think you get these parabolic situations in auctions. I remember watching very closely this auction for a Stegosaurus named Apex. And Apex it's a beautiful specimen. It's approaching 80% complete. It's one of the iconic dinosaur fossils that has been discovered by humanity since 1902. Watching this in real time, and it kind of just blowing past 5-6 billion and going into the 10 million range, the 20 million range, and the 30 million range, and then the $40 million range. And now I couldn't even understand what was happening. It ended at 44.6 million. Ken Griffin bought it. He's a huge, huge, huge collector. He comes up all over the place in this universe. And similarly, I believe that was a US bidder and Chinese bidder at the end, right? I kind of actually find in every single area of pursuit, whether it's artificial intelligence or
the AI
sciences or collectibles, it's always US and China at the end. It always is. It's hilarious. Yeah.
Got a question. You talk about collectibles as a debasement trade.
Yeah.
Do me a favor and help our listeners to understand really what you mean there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I view collecting really as a store of value debasement trade, a hedge against inflation, real world scarce asset of sorts. And humans are fascinating. We are meaning making machines. Various assemblies of atoms are imbued with meaning and therefore imbued with value. And if you take out your Benjamin Franklin with 100 on it, the intrinsic value is 0. We all know that, but we've all sort of agreed that it's worth $100. And if you read Neil Ferguson's book, The Ascent of Money, his own definition of money is trust inscribed, right? So if I flash back to 1971, where we're coming off the gold standard, we were in a period of heightened inflation during the 70s.
Right.
And from 1971 to 1980, 81, gold appreciated 24.3x. Wow. That's effectively a 40+% IRR. The S&P at the time was up a modest 2 to 3%. So you had a decade run of 10x performance, 10x alpha in this debasement trade. And your gold increasingly became this safe haven asset. If you added up every single ounce of gold that has ever been mined in the history of humanity and you multiplied it by the price per ounce, you would get a number between 35 and $37 trillion. That number is over 7 times larger than the market cap of NVIDIA. When you say that to a person in Silicon Valley, at Anthropic or at OpenAI, it's initially shocking. And gold is hitting all-time highs again recently. Right? And I argue that gold is the first collectible because people use it mostly for jewelry and for a store value. And central banks around the world are hoarding this stuff. So you then ask the question, well, what is the second largest collectible that exists? I argue that it's Bitcoin. And Bitcoin represents digital gold, but it's also just cryptographic scarcity. It is a cybernetic monetary virus that is secured. It's backed by energy, 20 gigawatts of power. And we know that there's just 21 million Bitcoin. So when I buy Bitcoin, I have an understanding of both my numerator and my denominator in a way that I do not when I have a US dollar, because the Federal Reserve keeps clicking the money printer button, right? So the denominator keeps changing, and it changes dramatically day over day, year over year. So Bitcoin has created $1.4 trillion of economic value over a 16-ish year period. Unbelievable. So you've got gold as a physical store of value. You've got Bitcoin as a digital store of value. And collectibles, in my view, are being slept on as the cultural store of value. And how big are collectibles? It's very hard to know, right? They're so opaque and there's not a lot of price discovery. So me and my team, we spent tons of time scraping auction data, trying to understand what's in the hands of museums and foundations and nation states and sovereigns, and just get at least an order of magnitude sense of how big this thing is. And it turns out it's a hard thing to answer. We think that it's about $25 trillion. That's the superset. Okay, so it's significantly bigger than Bitcoin, not quite as big as gold. But a lot of that 25 trillion is owned by foundations, museums, and nation states. So a modest 6.3 trillion, we believe, is owned by private citizens. And these are people like Mohammed bin Salman and Ken Griffin and Steve Cohen and David Rubenstein and Bill Gates and the richest people in the world. Right? So when you click in to that 6.3 trillion, what you find is that there's yet another nested power law where the top 20% most expensive collectible are driving over 80% of the net asset value. And those top 20% are owned by 10,000 people or so. Right? So there's 10,000 people in a population of nearly 8 billion that are benefiting from this debasement trade in the shadows. And if you look at even art like Basquiat's or Picasso's or Salvador Mundi, which sold for $450 million to Mohammed bin Salman just a few years ago, or you click into rare manuscripts like the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights or dinosaur fossils or Pokemon cards or sports cards or watches or rare cars and on movie props. Like there's so many little nooks and crannies in collectibles. And the best of the best assets, the grails, have unbelievable alpha.
Yeah.
Unbelievable alpha. That Pikachu card that we bought, that card was sold in 2012 for $50,000. That card has been compounding at 51% IRR for the last 14 years. Okay. It's a small little $16 million sliver of a $6.3 trillion superset. But nonetheless, when you click into all of these little subsets, you find that same pattern. So when I say debasement trade, I think that collectibles are the largest debasement trade I've ever seen since early gold, circa 1971, or early Bitcoin, circa 2009, 2010, and 2011. And people need to pay attention to this asset class, and it's about to get institutionalized.
So that's a great segue. So it's for that reason that you purchased the Pokemon cards through Treasure Trove, correct?
That's right.
So we've talked about this offline, and candidly, I was fascinated by kind of your insight and your thoughts on what you're doing there. So let's talk about what you're doing with Treasure Trove and you've done what you're planning to do going forward.
Definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, the Treasure Trove, back in 2020 when I was doing my own collecting, and a lot of stuff you can't find on eBay and you can't even find on heritage auctions. And there's just all kinds of stuff. And you gotta hunt it down, right? You gotta know where it is, who owns it. And it could be anywhere. That Pikachu card, as an example, that card has been in Japan. It's been in Dubai. It's been in Puerto Rico. It's been in New York. It's now in a vault in Delaware. That thing has been moving all over the place for many decades, right? And a lot of these buyers are anonymous. You have no idea who they are. And they're anonymous intentionally. So anytime I bought something, just as an individual, it felt like I was on a real life treasure hunt. Felt like I had an eye patch on and a carrot on my shoulder, and I'm on some crazy grand quest, and we're going to go find the Holy Grail. That's what it felt like. So, the Treasure Trove name is derivative of that feeling. And the Treasure Trove is kind of a catch-all for all the world's real-world scarce assets. And, I've been going on these, what I call, treasure hunts. I've been doing it with my brother, mostly, and my younger brother, he's up-and-coming film director. He's got his own production company, Infinity Studios. He's done music videos for Drake and DaBaby and Justin Bieber, Machine Gun Kelly. They've been seen nearly billions of times, and he's won a lot of film festivals for his first film called Money Talks, which chronicles the journey of a $100 bill, actually, that gets passed from person to person in 1981 New York over the course of a day. And you see the light and dark side of money, which is kind of interesting in the context of this conversation. But me and my bro, we're I'm sort of the financier, or, I'm kind of doing the math and trying to figure out what's what and like where to go next and purchasing. And my brother's he's been telling the stories, right? He's been filming these experiences, and in collecting, you meet some crazy people, crazy in every facet. Right? The collector mentality is an obsessive mentality. And so people can't just own one sports card.
Right.
I mean, I remember when we met each other, right, just the other week, and you can't just own one 1952, Topps rookie card. You got to own every single one, and they all need to be authenticated by PSA. They all need to be signed, right? So that behavior is ubiquitous. And
well, I think we also talked about you can't just collect one thing either. I mean, most collectors have other collections, whether it's artwork or watches or wine or whatever. So yeah,
that's right. So in some ways, you'll find somebody, right, and they'll be like, "What? Like, you're the guy who owns all the Mickey Mantles, or you're the guy who owns all the Honus Wagners, or whatever, the Michael Jordan Fleers, or whatever it may be." So, really the Treasure Trove, what I'm able to communicate right now is I'm just out here. I'm out here looking around. I've made some purchases that the Pikachu happened to just be allowed purchase by virtue of, Logan Paul and Ken Gold, all these people that were involved in that. Right? So it kind of went into orbit a little bit.
Well, plus the jaw-dropping price. I mean, that garners attention.
That too. Yeah. So, I've been going from different place to place, and I've looked at manuscripts. I think manuscripts are incredibly interesting as an asset class in collectibles. I think there's a lot of undervalued pieces in that area. And even the Americana manuscripts, things like the Bill of Rights or the Emancipation Proclamation or Declaration of Independence, a 13th Amendment. I mean, these are iconic documents, and they chronicle the story of our American history. Right? And we happen to be in the 250th anniversary of the country this July. I've been poking around the dinosaur world as well. And that world is probably the most idiosyncratic, unique, weird, fantastical portion of collecting that I've clicked into. And my best guess is dinosaurs, there could be $5 to $7 billion of market cap out there just in dinosaur fossils, mostly Stegosaurus, Triceratops, and T-Rex, of course. And manuscripts is also just all over the place. I'm trying to make good bets. And I think there's a lot of things that are undervalued, particularly in the context of this debasement trade. I mean, there's the micro and the macro, right? So we can have very nuanced discussions on any individual collectible, for sure. But the macro, though, you zoom way out, it's just so obvious. So obvious. This stuff is underpriced. So that's my 2 cents.
Is Treasure Trove going to be an investment vehicle for outside investors? Or is it more of a personal holding company for you that may ultimately become part of a larger investment? Or what's the game plan, or at least what are you willing to share about the game plan?
Yes. Yeah. So I really wanted to make sure that my core assumptions and hypotheses were right. So initially it was just myself personally, and then my fund's capital. But more recently, I've begun to scale the strategy and the approach. I'm now bringing on new investors into the Treasure Trove to really deploy like meaningful capital. I mean, we're looking to deploy many hundreds of millions of dollars into this category, and we've got a huge pipeline of different treasures. We've almost built like an internal treasure map, and we've got treasures we know about. We know where they are. We know who owns them. We know where they last transacted. We've got all kinds of nuanced data that represents the compounding sub-asset classes and so on and so forth. So that's exactly right. We are beginning to scale beyond our own capital. So that's more or less as much as I can say in a public format.
Fair enough. Now, you're not looking just for one-of-a-kind items. I mean, the Pokemon card, at least in a tin, is a one-of-a-kind. But, for example, the Declaration of Independence,
for sure,
there's multiple variations and multiple... But you're looking for kind of generational type collectibles.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're looking for things that can really stand the test of time. Right? So wants a Berkshire Hathaway style approach to collecting. Like what is going to compound over many, many, many decades? Like where can we, and things like the Declaration of Independence, yes, there's the Dunlaps and there's the broadsides and there's number of other different variations that exist, some of which are dated July 4th, some of which are a little bit later, some of which are dated 1823. If you buy one of these copper-plated versions that John Quincy Adams issued, there's tons of different declarations out there. But ultimately, the common thread in really good collectibles comes down to pretty simple demand-supply asymmetry, right? There has to be true scarcity. There has to be true mimetic value. And that mimetic value is often tied to stories, narratives, but also flows of capital and flows of attention, right? And if you look at even a place like Pokemon as a subset, I know we spent a lot of time there, there's billions of dollars of capital flow. And there's billions of hours of time and attention flow of human beings playing Pokemon games and playing the card games. And I encourage people to look up things like Collecticon or Collectopia or Comic-Con. I mean, there are trade shows out there that you can go to that have tens of thousands of people at them buying and selling cards over 2 days. I mean, I've been to many of them. And when I went to my first one, I was like, whoa, there's so many, there's way more people like me than I even appreciated, right? It's one thing to see the numbers on the screen and, this particular baseball game or this sporting event is generating this amount of views. And then it's another thing to actually physically go to the Super Bowl and see 80,000 people yelling and screaming and so on and so forth, or going to Comic-Con and seeing people that are dressed up like Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda or whatever it may be, or Captain America or Iron Man, or just a million characters that exist. There's a real intense fandom. And what I would offer people too is, in a world where AI is becoming increasingly ubiquitous, where you and I, Tom, are living through the singularity right now. We've passed the Turing test years ago at this point. We're moving into embodied intelligence. You're going to see robotics. You're going to see all kinds of sci-fi-like things over the next number of years, the next number of decades. And I think if things go well, which I hope they do, I generally am an optimist, a lot of our time is going to be reallocated I'm hopeful that humans will spend less time focused on basic needs like food and water and shelter and all those layers, those lower layers, those foundational layers of Maslow's hierarchy, and they'll begin to self-actualize. And when humans self-actualize, when they are post-scarcity, what do? They pick up hobbies. They play instruments. Like you, they buy 1952 Topps cards, or they go to conventions, or they start to get more creative. They start to have fun. And my theory is that a lot of value is going to accrue. A lot of investment value is going to accrue into all of those areas of self-actualization, particularly areas where there are scarce assets. Right? And collecting, in many ways, represents the culmination of that thesis. The AI narrative, the inflation narrative, the debasement narrative, which are all real, are fueling the collectible narrative. They're entangled with one another. I just encourage people to really just zoom out as far as you can and see what's actually happening.
Difficult to do. You talk about AI and you talk about 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I mean, that's compounding so fast that it almost feels like that's day to day.
Yeah.
Things are just changing. But any idea how involved private equity is starting to get into this space?
Yeah.
Because I sense from various auctions and the escalation of value, and of course all the money that these firms such as Solari Capital, for example, has, I think that intuitively, without having actual knowledge about this, intuitively, I'm thinking that that's pushing some of this up. What's your take on that?
I think you're right. I think the institutional capital, it is there. It's still small in the grand scheme of things in collecting. I mean, a lot of collecting is, at least collecting objects, right? You're talking about sports teams. I mean, private equity is in there heavily. Private equity deployed $10 billion into sports teams over the last 12 months. It's kind of a different animal. You're talking about movie props or trading cards or, things like this. I mean, there's some dabbling. There's dabbling happening. And there are some private equity firms or even some hedge funds that are in the space. I would say that it's still early in that way.
Still in infancy, huh? Yeah. Okay. With Treasure Trove, do you anticipate an eclectic portfolio of a number of collectibles, or do you feel like there's going to be a focus of more specific collectibles?
Yes, indeed. We are. I think it was interesting about gold is in gold, there is an atomic unit, and there is an ounce of gold. And then we've all sort of agreed that an ounce of gold is worth $5,000 plus an ounce. And there's 6.7 billion ounces. And that's it. That's the measurement system that we're using for gold. The atomic unit of Bitcoin is a singular Bitcoin, or it's a Satoshi. There's 21 million. That is the language and abstractions that we've used. And I think in collecting, what's unique or divergent from those two is those two are homogeneous assets, right? Like one piece of gold, if I have a piece of gold and you have a piece of gold, they're the same thing. I got a Bitcoin and you got a Bitcoin, they're the same thing. I have a Declaration of Independence and you have a T-Rex. Well, they're not the same thing, but in some ways they are, right? That's a core part of my argument. So the Treasure Trove believes that there should be an atomic unit for collectibles, right? Like there has to be some kind of abstraction that wraps collectibles such that people can get exposure, particularly at scale.
And so how does Treasure Trove differ from what you're doing with Solari Capital?
Definitely. Yeah, so Solari Capital, it's venture fund. Right? We're investing in pre-seed, seed, Series A companies in the early stage. We'll invest in growth rounds that are more pre-IPO. We focus on private markets investing with a real technology bent. So that's my and my other partners' backgrounds. So we're placing bets all the time, large and small. Every once in a while, though, we'll come across something that's really, really interesting. So a few years ago, that happened to be what's happening in mental health. And in mental health, there's a huge phase shift happening away from SSRIs, away from antidepressants, into a new wave of psychedelic therapeutics, things like ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, things like transcranial magnetic stimulation that actually have curative properties. Right? So instead of Zoloft, where you get numbed out, and really there's 42 million Americans now on antidepressants, and they don't really work. They're just kind of like a numbing agent, essentially. There's a new paradigm that is curative. So there's so many people that I'm close to that have PTSD or treatment-resistant depression or whatever it may be. So I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, well, we're going to have to build a really big provider network to take care of people in this new paradigm. The old paradigm is not going to work. The pill mill of shipping pills to your house continuously from CVS or your local pharmacy that you just take and numb out for decades, that's not going to work. We need in-person, vertically integrated clinics, provider networks that are integrated with insurance, psychiatrists, and therapists that can actually administer and deliver something that's truly healing for patients. So I said, hey, I didn't see anything or anyone building something in that space. So when we can't find an investment, but we have a thesis, we'll just start a company. So we started Radial Health. I've got wonderful partners in that business I've known for many years, and including Elliot Cohen, who built PillPack, which he sold to Amazon for $1 billion in 2018, and John Capisolantro, who was with him the whole way through, who's the CEO of the business. We had a board meeting actually just earlier today, and we're growing really quickly, and we're treating a lot of patients, and that business has blossomed from an idea or a thesis into a real company, right? So, Treasure Trove is like that as well. Treasure Trove is a company. It's a new company that's in its infancy and scaling right now.
So I'm going to close out with a question really kind of revolving around what you were just talking about. So, our podcast is called Significance of Wealth, and you have a lot of things going on between buying Pokemon cards and chasing other things such as dinosaur fossils and manuscripts and whatnot. But, you're working on, to some extent, what you were just talking about, but MDMA therapy for PTSD. So just taking all that into account and taking everything that you're doing into account, give me an idea of how you personally define what makes something significant.
It's a deep question. Well, I mean, when you go to the Solari website, you'll see a simple tagline that says reality is programmable. It's kind of a provocative statement, right? The presupposition of that statement is that every single bit and atom is in fact programmed. And that you, Tom, or me, AJ, or humanity as a whole, we are creators. We are actively programming our reality. So whether it's PTSD or treatment-resistant depression, which in my view, for a lot of people is a struggle. It's a struggle of entropy of the mind. Terrible things have happened to people. There's victims of rape and veterans of war. But you, as a human, you have plasticity. You can rewrite those meanings. You can program your mind with neurolinguistic programming or exogenous resources. You can do it, right? And the chair that I'm sitting in is programmed by whoever built it. Those atoms are rearranged into this chair. This building is programmed. Mickey Mouse is programmed and Pikachu is programmed. We are creators at our core. So what really fueled me and where I'm fascinated and interested in is what's the frontier of programmability, both in programmable intelligence and programmable biology and programmable matter, but also just in this case, in collectible too. Because what is collectibles? Collectibles like the Pikachu card or the Mickey Mantle tops that you own. It is programmed. Those atoms are imbued with meaning. They mean something to you, as they mean something to many, and that meaning translates into value. Right. So there's layers of abstraction that we've created. We are constantly programming. our surrounding reality. And that's what really fascinates me.
So I gave you a deep question and we got a deep response. Fantastic.
That's right. That's right. We're getting metaphysical here at the end, Tom. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, to close out, AJ, any further comments, number one, and number two, any place that if somebody's listening to this that they'd want to go check out Treasure Trove or Solari Capital, websites, information, anything you'd like to put out there?
Definitely. Yeah, you can check out Solari Capital at solaricap.com. You can check out Treasure Trove at treasuretrove.com. Grateful we got the domain. That was easier said than done. But yeah, you can follow us on social media, particularly with the Treasure Trove. The whole purpose there is you're going to be following these treasure hunts, right? So we want people to be along the ride. And this ride is that's right. This ride is an exciting and fun ride, right? So that's what we want. That's what we're hoping. That's the kind of brand that we're hoping to build.
Yeah. AJ, phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much, and love what you're doing. Love kind of the vision that you have, not just in the collectible, but just the real broad vision that you have. I think is just spectacular, and love hearing about it. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for the invite.
That brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to Significance of Wealth on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. You can also follow Tom Ruggie and Destiny Family Office on LinkedIn and destinyfamilyoffice.com for more insights on wealth management, private market opportunities, and collectibles. Until next time. The expressed views, thoughts, and opinions belong solely to the host and/or guests and are not investment recommendations or opinions issued by Destiny Wealth Partners or its affiliates. Investment advisory services are offered through Destiny Wealth Partners, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Destiny Wealth Partners also conducts business under the name Destiny Family Office. Destiny Family Office podcasts are the sole property of Destiny Family Office, and information provided is for informational and educational purposes only. Learn more at www.destinyfamilyoffice.com/disclosures.